Here comes Moses. Here comes the quarterback, Burrow. Looking for a block, and he got it up in the front by Hopkins into the end zone. Touchdown!
Fakes, throwing to the end zone, wide open is Higgins for the Cincinnati touchdown.
There's the sneak. Burrow gets low, driving towards the goal line. He's inside the one, and he's into the end zone for the touchdown.
Welcome to New Stripe City, a YouTube channel for diehard Bengals fans. I am your host, Ace Boogie, and yes, I know the Bengals have been busy, and we're here to talk about this trade that went down, right? They traded for BJ Hill. They traded Billy Price for BJ Hill. So we're going to talk about some things, but this is a very exciting move. It makes sense for both sides. We're going to give you some overview about who BJ Hill is, and if you're a Giants fan and you're watching this, we will give you from our side why the Bengals traded Billy Price. So if you're looking for that information, we'll also have that. But before we get started, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you don't know where it is, it's in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. There's a link in the description if you're unsure of that. We're also doing a jersey giveaway where once we get to 15,000 subs, we're actually giving away a jersey. So please be sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter at New Stripe City. But let's get into the meat and potatoes. Why did the Bengals end up trading Billy Price? Honestly, ever since the Bengals drafted him in 2018, he did not live up to the hype of what we thought that he would be. If you're looking for an example, look no further than Frank Ragnow. Back then, the Bengals actually wanted Frank Ragnow. They couldn't get him because the Detroit Lions ended up snatching him up. We ended up taking Billy Price, and we expected Billy Price to come in and replace Russell Bodine, who was a horrible center. And once he came in, he actually was drafted by the current offensive line coach, Frank Pollock. He just didn't live up to it. And honestly, he probably may have been worse for Bodine or worse than Bodine to start it off. And then he ended up having some injuries that weren't really his fault. But because he had pec injuries and ankle injuries and things of that nature, he ended up losing his position to Trey Hopkins, who is still the Bengals' starting current center. So he had never really lived up to the hype. That is why the Bengals didn't end up exercising his fifth-year option. And it was a foregone conclusion after they gave Trey Hopkins the starting job. He played admirably. They gave him an extension. The writing was pretty much on the wall. They tried moving Billy Price to the right guard position. It just really didn't work. The one thing that I will say is throughout all of this, though, he's always been a positive teammate. He's always been there helping guys out and things of that nature. So if you are getting this guy, he's not going to be a guy that causes any kind of drama or anything like that. He really didn't like Jim Turner, who was the Bengals' former offensive line coach. He was horrible, honestly. So if you're wanting to know about Jim Turner, he is trash. He told Billy Price to gain weight so that he could play guard, and then he ended up doing that. Still did not get an opportunity there. But at the end of the day, what you're getting in Billy Price is probably a player that still has some potential. And he definitely looked good in the preseason. I won't take that away from him. So if the Giants are looking for a guy that can come in and potentially start, I think that Billy Price is your guy. Just depends on where you want him to play at. He can play center or he can play guard. So if you're getting him there, you're getting a solid player, but he's not going to be this all-star center that you're expecting him to be. Or if you think that he's going to be a savior, that's probably not likely. Some people would probably consider him a bust, being that and honestly, that's the measurement for any player that you don't renew their fifth-year option. They're pretty much a bust. But he's not like extremely horrible. Like he could be solid, but he's not going to be Frank Ragnow. He's not going to be a Pro Bowl player. He's not going to be anything like that. But let's talk about the real reason that we really made this video, and it's to get some information on BJ Hill. So obviously they traded for BJ Hill. It seems that he will be playing kind of a defensive tackle 3 technique within the Cincinnati scheme. And he's coming from New York's 3-4 scheme. And he obviously is going to play a defensive tackle in the 4-3 since that's what we kind of run. We actually kind of run a little bit of a hybrid, so we'll have to see how they use him. And he's probably going to be likely a rotation piece for us to use, probably behind Larry Ogunjobi. He also gives us some insurance in the event that Larry Ogunjobi, who did have an injury during preseason, he's healthy now, but he does give us some insurance for that. And we only signed Larry Ogunjobi for 1 season, so he definitely gives us some depth there. It will be interesting to see what they do with the Mike Daniels now, given this circumstance and how they move with Cam Sample and things of that nature. So I think that he's definitely going to be a quality defender to have. And looking back over his draft profile and just some in-depth information about him, he was drafted in the 3rd round in 2018 out of North Carolina State. So obviously he was drafted by the Giants. He's from Oakboro, North Carolina. His player profiler comparison is Muhammad Wilkerson. So that's very interesting. He's 6'3", 311 pounds. He's only 25 years old, 33-inch arms. The biggest thing for me, no reported injuries, whereas with Billy Price, as we know, he kind of had his fair share of struggles with injuries. So that's good to hear that he has a clean bill of health, no injury history. He also ran a 4.99 40. His prospect grade going back to the combine per NFL.com was 6.19, which rated him as a good backup who could become a starter. They actually compared him to Marvin Austin. And so just to give a little bit of the combine overview from NFL.com to give you a little bit more of what they thought of him as a prospect. Hill is a one-gapping upfield defensive tackle with decent athleticism who seems to be able to find the ball at an adequate rate despite lacking some play strength. While Hill's production has been solid, he will develop more strength at the point of attack, or he will become a more explosive upfield player to set himself apart and become a rotational defensive tackle. So that was courtesy of NFL.com. They list some of his strengths here. They say that he's an athletic interior lineman. His movement is natural and fairly smooth. He's good at the jump and play directions. He shows good recognition. So those were just some of the strengths that he had. But obviously, every player can't have just strengths. They do have to have some kind of weaknesses. And coming into the NFL, some of his weaknesses were that his play strength at the point of attack was a concern. He gives ground against initial contact when facing a quality drive blocker and doesn't play with the lower body anchor that teams typically like. So those were some of the issues. Obviously, those are things that can always be switched out with coaching and improved on with coaching, which obviously with them having someone like Marion Hobby, those could be things that, you know, could have been a thing of the past that he can get out or not. So let's look at his PFF grades. So when I looked at him, just like everybody else, the first thing that you're probably going to look at is you're going to Google his PFF grades, right? Because box scores only can do so much. Career stats can only do so much. So I took a look at him, and in the preseason, he actually had an elite grade of 85. Now, obviously, we don't know how many snaps that was for. It's the preseason. We don't know which, team he was in. Was he on the first team? Was he on the second team? I'm not sure. But when you look at the rest of his grades, they're actually pretty solid. You talk about 2020, he had a defensive grade of 73.4, 75.9, 2019, 69.1, 2018, has career sacks. He has a career number, 8 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, 51 hurries. And he's played in the New York system, 900 snaps over the B gap, 300 over the tackle. And he's had some other places, but that's primarily where he's kind of been played at. And per our own Malik Wright from the Wright Report, he says that he's likely to be used as Wallace Gilberry inside and out. And some people are probably wondering, why did New York trade him? From what I was able to find, it appears that, a lot of his sacks they claim in 2018 came in one game against the Bears. He had 2 sacks in the past 2 seasons, and he saw his playing time dwindle once the Giants ended up getting Leonard Williams. So once they ended up trading for Leonard Williams, they just didn't have, really space for him to play. And they've had issues on their offensive line. So when they saw that they could get someone like Price, they ended up jumping on it because they have real big issues at the offensive line. And they felt like they probably weren't going to give him an extension or anything after that. So they went ahead and made the evaluation and kind of moved on. So it's similar to what the Bengals kind of had with their situation, right? We had Trey Hopkins already. Obviously, Trey Hopkins was going to be there. Obviously, Billy Price was probably moving on in the offseason. It just made more sense for us to do this. The one thing that is interesting, though, is we probably thought that they would be more involved in the edge game, and it appears that they were looking for the 3 techniques as well. Like I said, I don't know what this means for Mike Daniels. I don't know what it means for any of those guys on the roster, but it definitely makes that final 53 projection, it definitely shakes it up a bit, right? So for me, I think that this is an amazing move for the Bengals. Even if you get BJ Hill and he's a great backup, I think that you're definitely getting younger in the trenches. You're adding more talent there. And that way, when you move Ogunjobi out of that rotation and bring this guy in with Hill, you probably don't lose much from the two. So definitely is a quality depth signing. It's a great move because the Bengals always kind of make these trades. But just think about it. This is a trade for a kid that is only 25 years of age. I would think that since he's in that same draft class with Billy Price, I would imagine he's in the last year of his deal, but this still stockpiles a need for them because they needed to get a three technique moving forward, especially with moving away from Geno Atkins in the offseason, who had to play last season with just one shoulder, essentially. And Larry Ogunjobi, you only really signed him on a one-year deal. Now this gives you a full year to evaluate Ogunjobi, and you can evaluate Hill and then kind of decide what you're going to do moving forward instead of having to potentially use a top draft pick in the first round or second round next season. Maybe if one of these guys performs, maybe you can extend them at the end of the season. Or maybe it's a situation where it doesn't work out and you're not really burnt. But I think that the reward is way more than the risk here. You probably weren't going to play Billy Price at all. He's probably going to sit on your bench. So why not add in another guy that is actually going to get you some quality snaps at the position? I have a super chat here from my man Aquila the Great. So I'm going to go ahead and get into that real quick. Aquila, my guy, appreciate you for the $5 super chat. He asked, Ace, did you see Trey Hill? He was an absolute monster versus the Washington football team. I think that this definitely bodes well for Trey Hill, and I'm glad that Aquila brought that up because Trey Hill was a guy that they drafted this season, and I actually had him not making the roster because they had Billy Price there, right? And I had them putting him on the practice squad, but it appears that he must have made some sort of impression on this NFL coaching staff of the Bengals because you would assume he's got to be the backup center now. It appears that he did do his thing against the Washington football team. He didn't play that well, according to PFF, against the Dolphins, but this is showing that they have full confidence in Trey Hopkins being 100%. They have full confidence in Trey Hill backing him up, and they are deciding to go ahead and make a move. Now, this also makes you wonder, how is it going to affect the defensive line? How is it going to affect the offensive line? But we'll see. But I think that that's a great point that Aquila hit on. Obviously, they are fully confident in Trey Hill's ability. And Trey Hill was kind of a sleeper, right? Came out of Georgia. A lot of people wondered about him. And there wasn't much to really fully know about him. But obviously, we got to evaluate him. And that's why the preseason is so important. So I would personally rate this as an A. I think for, both teams, I think that New York, if you have issues on your offensive line, which it seems from my research and reading that they do, you're getting a solid lineman, not somebody that's going to be elite, not somebody that's going to be very good. I think his ceiling is probably average, slightly above average. So I think that you get some, I guess, average play at center, guard, whatever your situation is. So I think that it works for both sides. I got another super chat here from my man Joe for $5. Appreciate that, bro. How do you think the D-line will be against the run? I think that they will be stout against the run, especially compared to what they've done in years past. I mean, last year, it's no secret, the Bengals' run defense was horrible, but we've seen throughout this preseason, outside of the offensive line looking better, the defensive line in terms of the run game and in terms of the pass rush under Marion Hobby looked much improved. I would love to hear if Marion Hobby was the guy that looked at Hill or how this was done. And it'll be interesting to see if the Bengals make even more moves. So that is all I have. I truly appreciate you guys for stopping by. I'm glad that you guys hit me up about this. I'm sorry I was caught up at work earlier, so I wasn't able to immediately release the information. But when I did talk to you guys, I wanted to be sure that you got the best information that I could give you. And I made sure that I researched most of it for everything. So that way, when I gave you my analysis, hopefully you would be more informed. But as usual, I need you guys to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll leave you guys with a who day all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.
Here comes motion. Here comes the quarterback, Burrow. Looking for a block, and he got it up in the front by Hopkins into the end zone. Touchdown!
Fakes, throwing to the end zone, wide open is Higgins for the Cincinnati touchdown.
There's the sneak. Burrow gets low, driving towards the goal line. He's inside the one, and he's into the end zone for the touchdown.